Thank you all very much indeed for coming, first of all, and I'd like to also thank Jeff for working with me on putting this on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a few words firstly about the KPMG report, which is what this meeting is mainly about. And then if Jeff would like to have the opportunity to ask questions to start with, and then we'll just take questions from the floor. Are you all right with that, Jeff?
I personally don't have any questions.
You don't have any questions?
Or it's best that
okay.
the opportunity to get this out into the open.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate...
Rather than all these rumours going around,
yeah.
to try and get some sort of idea of exactly what's happening.
Absolutely. So I appreciate that, and thank Jeff for working on that with us this week. The KPMG report is one of a number into what's called distressed health economies throughout the NHS, and it looks into Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. And the reason is that NHS England, about a year or so ago, recognised that in many of the health economies around the country, for various reasons, there were big financial deficits looming in the coming years. And there are various reasons for that. One, in Staffordshire, is the what we view as constant underfunding of Staffordshire, the county rather than the city of Stoke-on-Trent, although Stoke still probably has a slight shortfall, over many years. The way that NHS funding has been done over many years is it's looked at health needs in an area, and it's looked at age profiles, and they've come up with an amount per head. And in Staffordshire, that's typically been much lower than the national average for England. So as a result, you've had constant pressure, particularly in the county of Staffordshire, but across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, compared with some of the more metropolitan areas of the country, where the assessed needs are considered to be higher, and therefore the per capita funding is higher. Now, you may have come across this also with education, where Staffordshire has, for a long time, been one of the lowest funded education authorities in the country. In fact, the difference on health funding is even greater than on education, even though health funding hasn't, the difference in health funding hasn't made the headlines so much. So these reports were set against that background. So KPMG were asked by NHS England to look into some reasons for this, and they produced some ideas of what could be done, proposals of what could be done. They were they were then put to the various people in the local health economy on a confidential basis. They were put to members of Parliament were allowed to see the proposals, and we first saw those members of Parliament who wanted to see them. First saw them. We were shown them on a confidential basis by University Hospital, North Staffordshire, in one of our regular meetings there towards the end of last year. Now, those proposals, and they're really fairly summary in the document which was leaked last week, show that there are a large number of issues in Staffordshire. One of them is a lack of coordination between various NHS bodies. Another is the way in which frankly, people talk to each other within the NHS. There's reference to the way in which emails are sent around, and I, to some extent, have seen that myself in some of the correspondence that I've seen. So there are, if you like, procedural issues there. They also talk about whether the number of community beds in the north of the county, that should be looked at, and interestingly, some of those have been reopened in Longton Cottage Hospital, particularly more recently. They also look at the number of community beds in places like Tamworth, and of course for us, most controversially, they had this suggestion about the future of our hospital here, saying that it could be looked at as being an elective and rehabilitation hospital, as opposed to what we have at the moment, and what the TSA recommendations are. So of course, those recommendations, or that report, was circulated around the Staffordshire health economy. It has not been published. I wish it had been published a long time ago. A number of us were asking for it to be published. Joan Wally, a few weeks ago in the House of Commons, asked for it to be published. and eventually last week it was given to the BBC, and as a result of it you've seen it. Obviously, as far as we're concerned in Staffordshire, although all the points that I've already made apply in terms of the need for more integration, another point they made was quite a lot of the care for people in Staffordshire goes on outside Staffordshire. So some of the money, if you like, for the Staffordshire health economy goes to hospitals and other providers which are not within Staffordshire. So one of the things that they were suggesting was that more of this should come into Staffordshire to help the financial situation with Staffordshire NHS. And I think that's, many of those points I think are perfectly reasonable and important points. So the report as a whole shouldn't be rubbish. There are many important things in there to learn. But particularly the point about Stafford was clearly something that was completely unacceptable, and in fact was pretty much dismissed straight away, because otherwise if anybody was considering implementing that, they wouldn't have gone ahead with the TSA proposals which already had been confirmed by the government and were starting to be implemented, including the investment which is taking place both here and in Stoke and in Wolverhampton. So that's really the background to this report, and I'm happy to take any questions from anybody on it. I don't necessarily just want to stick to the KPMG report, although that's the reason for this meeting, because there are obviously wider issues that the KPMG report refers to, and I'd be happy to take any questions on any of those. I may not know all the answers. I do have a meeting with on Monday with UHNM, and I will, if there are questions specifically about that I don't have the answers to now, I will put them there and get the answers back. But I think with that introduction, if we can just begin to take questions, because I think the most important thing is to get all the questions that are here out of the way. Yeah.
You said that the BBC were given the report in after 2 weeks.
Yeah.
There's been, as far as I'm aware, nothing online, none of the political or health programmes have mentioned it. Would there be a reason for that?
I thought it was. I thought that the BBC did put it online, as far as I know. It was certainly all the. I mean, I've got copies of it. As far as I know, what I got is what the BBC put online. So yeah, it's available. Yeah.
They put on the Film Candid.
They put it on some Film Candid. Yeah. Yes, Kate.
I think we both know how phones like KPMG work, and if you don't have something that's in conclusion, and we should repeat it through body of the report, you get to say to them, take that bit out and reissue it. Why did the government not tell KPMG to take out all of the information on the savings that could be obtained from land sales? Why did you leave in the section that says this solution should be pursued with full rigour? Why did you, instead of admitting openly that this was the only solution they could make for the continuing £70 million hole in Staffordshire's health finances, why did the government work so hard to bury this report for almost a full year and to try and keep it buried until after the general election?
Firstly, this is not a government report. This is an NHS England report, and as people know, and as you know, NHS England is not the government. NHS England is actually headed up by Simon Stevens, who was, in fact, appointed by the previous government. He was an official under the previous government. So, firstly, it was not the government. The government did one of the things that has been tried to get away from is to avoid having the government's fingerprints over absolutely everything. And therefore, NHS England decided, I think wrongly, not to publish it, despite pressure from various people to do so. Now, therefore, it was a report to NHS England by KPMG. KPMG made the suggestion, that's probably what they genuinely thought was a good idea. Now, it happens to be an idea which we don't believe in, the NHS England didn't believe in and didn't accept, and we don't believe in.
Sorry,
but
this report was
Several chances
sorry.
to answer.
No,
I'm asking you a question.
Can you tell me, is that wrong? Is this report
Hey,
not
sit
being
down.
done?
Will you sit down? Sit down.
Can I can I just answer the question?
You're still going to be bulldozed according to you, isn't it?
We have had, in January last year, the Secretary of State stood up in the House of Commons and he said, and we don't necessarily like everything in it at all, but he said, I accept the TSA's report as is. The Trust Special Administrator was appointed by Monitor and has statutory functions. Therefore, the report that the TSA produced was a statutory report, and under the law, that report had to be either accepted or rejected. It was accepted with one proviso, which is the maternity review, which has actually just been announced this week. The KPMG report was completely different. The KPMG report was an advisory report looking into this serious problem that we've got. Let's not beat around the bush. We have got a serious problem of a potential £200 million shortfall by 2018-19 in the Staffordshire health economy. And that's a fact that we have to take into consideration. So I don't, they did this for 10 or 11 other health economies. It wasn't just Staffordshire. So they were looking at how would it be possible, what could be done in order to address this. And they looked at better working together, they looked at tariff reductions. As you know, we've been having, since 2008-9, 4% year-on-year tariff reductions for particularly acute services across the NHS. And they said, and actually this was another good point they made, they said we don't believe these 4% year-on-year reductions are sustainable any longer, a point I've made for the last couple of years, and I think people are beginning to recognise. So they made some extremely good points there. They also made this point, they said, why not look at the county hospital, at Stafford Hospital again, and the TSA proposals. They were fully entitled in a recommendation, in a report, to say that. It is a completely different thing to saying that NHS England accepted that, or that the government accepted that. I've been involved in writing many reports for the government through Parliament, and what happens is you write them, and then the government comes back and says, recommendation 1, agree, recommendation 2, disagree. This is entirely in that category.